All right, we are now back in confines of the room, away from the thunderstorm. So that's great, man. I mean, we were talking about getting in. What is that? Like we were talking about how you got into Indian culture, and all.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's actually get back into that a little later. But now TikTok, right?
Yeah.
So actually, the theme of my thing is going to be how can I understand Gen Z?
Sure.
As a Gen X can understand Gen Z, you know. A lot of times there are a lot of misconceptions and even dismissal of values.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm sure it's mutual.
Yeah.
So if you had to explain TikTok, the lure of TikTok to us.
I think that generationally, right, the way we consume content changes, right? And because generationally, there's always something which is a more stimulating form of content, right? Like there would have been a time when people's pastime was books, right? And parents would be like, oh, my child is wasting his time reading books, right? And then that turned into movies, right? And then movies will turn into, well, no, that became radio, and then it becomes TV shows and it becomes movies, etc., right? So now we're in a form of consuming content where just if you look at like 10 years ago, even 15 years ago, right? The way we consumed content was that what we deemed to be like fast content was like YouTube.
Yeah.
Right? And then now the way people use YouTube as a platform is completely shifted. YouTube is a long form content. People only go on YouTube, from my generation at least, when they want to see something substantial. It's not a way to waste time. It's like, oh, if I'm eating and I want to learn something, they'll watch a video essay. They'll watch something informative. YouTube is usually for something that is substantial and there's a good amount of production quality in it. It's no longer the fast, accelerated, like low production at home kind of content, right? Because where that kind of content is stored is always the most stimulating form of content of that time, right? So now that's TikTok is like, it delivers you so much in like 15 seconds or 7 seconds, right? And then it also removes the burden that you have in terms of a lot of these prior platforms, and that it's not search engine, it's not search based, right? That's not how you find content. They have a tailored algorithm which will find content for you, right? And then if you look at from a UI perspective, development perspective, right? On YouTube, how much of the screen are we using for content? We're using this much of the screen, then you click it and then you get the full screen. And then I'm searching things manually, right? So there's a lot of things that the user has to do. There's a lot of user inputs, right? On TikTok, the only user input that's really there is like, comment, right? How long you watch a video for, all of these things on like how you interact with the video. But if you look at it, the video takes up the whole screen. The next time you swipe to the next video, right? So it's like an infinite thing, right? So if you look at YouTube, right? Every 15 minutes, every 5 minutes, every 20 minutes, I'm getting a dopamine hit. And I'm manually clicking something. And I'm looking for something and I'm scrolling through, oh, I have all of these options, right?
Yeah.
So then there's a lot more choice involved. Here, there's no choice. It's just scroll, 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 scroll. And it's the full screen and it's short. So I get a new dopamine hit every single time I scroll. And I think that is like, at this point in time, it's like the most attractive form of media just from a psychological perspective, right? But we're going to get to a point where even that becomes kind of dated and we have even more.
Right. So how was it? What are your thoughts on, say again, it could be a Gen and prior thing. We always look for ROI or utility of things.
Yeah, sure.
You told YouTube is for something serious content. Yeah. So what do you think is a value that
TikTok creates? So I think with any platform, the value will come. The value comes with the age of the platform, right? Because if you look at YouTube, right, we would have been asking these same questions about YouTube in the 2000s. Right? Took us until the early 2010s, people are going to say, oh, there's like TEDx talk, there's useful content, right? But the initial cusp of YouTube, those like first 5 years, people weren't really seeing the value of YouTube, right? Especially from an outsider's perspective. From an insider's perspective, the young people who are using it, they would have seen it, right? And I think, everyone from my generation can kind of attest to the fact that YouTube has been very useful as a resource.
Totally.
Right? Yeah. But as far as TikTok, I think that people from your generation have yet to adopt this form of content and have yet to see usefulness in this kind of short form content. But people from my generation definitely have, right? Because one thing is when you're reading a textbook or you're reading a paper or you're reading a lot of things, there's a lot of fluff.
Yeah.
Right? And there's only so much information that we can put in our brains, right? And if you look at, people around my age today, they're very overwhelmed with a lot of things. Academics, you know what I mean? Like academic environment has become a lot more competitive, I'd say. And just because of that, I think short form content kind of succeeds. in delivering information in a really quick way, right? And you get a tidbit of information really fast. And another thing that's on TikTok is slideshows, right?
Oh, okay.
Right, and it'll be slideshows. There'll be like some music in the background. But here's the thing, right? If I have a slideshow and I know you can scroll up and you can scroll down at any time and a new video will pop up, I'm gonna do everything to make the user experience of that slideshow, like how do I make the slideshow as captivating as possible? How do I make it as concise as possible, right? Because when you only have a fraction of like time to get someone's attention, the way in which you word things is extremely concise and it's extremely direct and straightforward, right? So you'll see a lot of advice about like college applications, internships, right? A lot of these things which have real life ROI, right? So that's one thing. Then another thing is people also do make longer form content on TikTok, but that longer form content is still capped at like 10 minutes. Right? So there are people who will talk and sit there and talk about something which is captivating and interesting. There's people who do this with history, with news, right? With all of these different facets of society and, things that people are interested in, right? Like, and it's not just people who've made a platform out of talking about something and teaching something. It's also people who are like academically qualified to talk about those things. There are professors and there are also a bunch of people who are making that kind of informational content on TikTok. So it's very much there, right? So that's one thing. Another thing is there's a STEM feed on TikTok.
Explain that.
So there's a For You page, right? Which is what the algorithm gives you, right? And then there's your following page. But you'll notice, like, if you look at YouTube, and it used to kind of be very subscription based, like whoever you subscribe to is what you get recommended, and that's how their thing worked. Because that's how a lot of the more primitive forms of social media work. It was based on who you follow, right? And then we got to this algorithm based form of social media where it's like it can detect your interest by like the content that you interact with. And TikTok was basically that on steroids, right? That's what ByteDance, the parent company of TikTok, basically attempted to do, right? And they first tried to do this content with informational content, actually, right? With STEM content. And they realized that doesn't work, right? It's not captivating enough, right? At least given the software and everything that was available and then the screen quality, because they were doing this like iPhone 5 time. They tried to do this, right? And at that point, it just wasn't feasible at all. Now it's feasible, right? So now we see kind of a resurgence in ByteDance's like original app that they wanted to create. We see a resurgence in this in the STEM feed, which is there, right? So there's 3 feeds. There's a For You, following, and then the STEM feed. STEM feed is like you can scroll and it's all just STEM related videos.
Just for STEM?
Just for STEM. And I'm going to be honest, this is not something that people really use. You know what I mean? But it's great that it's there. Right?
It's there universally in the main app. There's a STEM feed, is it?
Yes. Wow. So it's great that it's there, right? And I mean, people using it is up to them, right? But one thing that is interesting though is you will get STEM videos on your For You page anyways, right? Like I think like so many people got like a kind of SAT tip videos and stuff like that because the algorithm can see by the content you interact with, you're around this age, etc. Right? It's giving you those kind of things, or you'll get like an occasional videos like study tips, these kinds of things, right? Because it's not just how can you make these things interesting, it's like how can you solve people's problems, right? So it's like, you're not gonna find an entire CS lecture, right? But you're gonna see like tips, you know what I mean? Like like how to get an internship, right? Like what are the steps like for career timeline, all these things, SAT prep, PSAT prep, LSAT prep, MCAT prep, all of these things you can find it on TikTok, and you can find like great quality content, right? So all of that exists.